Sorry. There we go. Okay, so by joining the recorded meeting, everybody is consenting to being recorded, right? Yes, okay. So today we're gonna actually have a pretty short meeting, I think. We're not gonna be making any recommendations, but we have an opportunity to gather here, just get updates from each other. And then we have Bethany Creaser from the Agency of Agriculture to answer any questions you have about CAT 14 or pesticide certification or licensing questions. So the first thing we should do is probably roll call. So we're just going to go around our rooms and introduce ourselves. My name is Emily. I'm with the Agency of Agriculture, and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Maria. I'm also with the Agency of Agriculture and I use she, her pronouns.
Chris Flynn, Department Botanist of Fish and Wildlife, she, her.
That's Steve Martello, National Park Service, Natural Resources Program Lead for the.
I'm Abigail Johnson. I'm a fellow with the National Park Service Office of Boundary Reclamation, she, her.
I'm Lynn McNamara. I'm the Stewardship Director at the Nature Conservancy, she, her pronouns.
Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie Smith,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Agency of Agriculture off the screen. That doesn't matter which side. And I use she, her pronouns.
Judy? Oh, we're just introducing ourselves?
Surprise. Hi, Judy Wasowski, state entomologist. That help team. And greeter. Kim Jensen, the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation and Aquatic Botanist.
Ben Dillner, with the Agency of Agriculture Plant Health Team, and he, him.
All right, Caitlin.
Hi everyone, Caitlin Cusack, she, her pronouns, and I'm a forester with the Vermont Land Trust.
Katie?
She, her, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biologist.
Thanks. Bonnie?
Hello, I'm Bonnie Donahue. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the VTrans landscape architect.
Thanks. Anne?
Hi, Anne Hazelrig, UVM, Plant Diagnostic Clinic, she, her.
Great. Toby?
Hi, Toby Alexander, state biologist and forester for NRCS in Vermont.
All right, Bethany?
I'm Bethany Creaser, Vermont Agency of Agriculture Pesticide Certification and Training, she, her.
All right, great. Today, we're going to start off with just going around the room, giving our committee member updates if you have anything to share. If you don't, it's totally fine, but it's a nice opportunity. It'll be an opportunity before the field season that this group can talk about anything related to invasives. So yeah, Kim, would you mind not putting you on the spot or anything? Do you have any updates? Yeah, and what did you think of the eclipse?
It was amazing. I also use she, her pronouns, I forgot to mention. Let's see, updates. We hired a full-time person to help me, Lizzie Gallagher. So that's 2 additions to my staff. We're still waiting to hire one other person. The position is stuck at the governor's office. Other biologists to add to the fleet. Updates, we put out 62 or 67 actually individual projects for aquatic nuisance control grant and aid. Working with about 31 partners. And we are gearing up for water chestnut operations in Lake Champlain for the season and surveying for aquatic invasive species threats throughout the state. So I can't believe it's almost field season.
Yeah.
I think I'll just leave it at that.
Busy. Yeah. Lynn, would you mind If there's nothing, that's totally fine.
I don't really have updates. I'm sorry, I haven't been able to attend any of these meetings previously, but
Totally
I'm
fine.
here today.
Great. You want to give your update?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So just gearing up for the field season, over the winter, we took out a big stand in Norway maple at St. Gaudens. So now we've taken that park from a park that had like 15 acres, really dense thickets, to a park that has 0 acres, 0 thickets. Got some funding on the way to do a restoration plan, some native and climate adapted species. So I'm stoked about that. And doing some volunteer work. And I've been looking into Japanese tree lilac because it was planted in St. Gaudens a very long time ago. And we've had a problem, still causing a problem. So I was talking to Emily yesterday about, I found 2 assessments, one by New York State. So, other than that, nothing too fascinating.
Where's that?
St. Gaudens, it's in Cornish, New Hampshire, so it's right across the bridge from Windsor, right? And it's a site that has a bunch of anthropogenic wetlands, so it's a dam, and Japanese tree lilac escaped and essentially formed a subcanopy layer underneath sycamore. It's like a sycamore foot. And persisted for many, many, many years. So it's just strange. We haven't really come across it. It seems to be like really situational in terms of the areas that are located. It could also be that we're probably one of the first sites in the with Jeff. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Do you have anything? I don't. All right. Okay, this is really going to be quick. Caitlin, how are you doing? Any
Doing
updates from
good.
Realty?
Doing great. So I know some of you attended the CISMA, the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area meeting. Gosh, what would that have been, a couple of weeks ago at this point? And so just Peter had asked that I share with the group that it was a really energizing meeting, and there were a lot of folks attending from the current CISMAs, but also folks who are interested in starting CISMAs in their own parts of the state. So right now, what they're working on is applying for funding to fund some of the management work and some of the assessment work that the different groups are hoping to undertake. So I think I know Emily and Toby, if they haven't already reached out, they'd like to reach out to you for letters of support. But if anyone else felt, inclined to write a letter of support for that work, I know the CISMAs would certainly appreciate it.
Great. Toby, any updates from your neck of the woods?
Not a ton, I wouldn't say. We're just seeing really historic funding levels from IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, especially for climate smart practices, and brush management or invasive plant control practices on that list. So as long as it's paired up with some other stuff, forest stand improvement, tree planting, that sort of thing, should be very well funded for invasive plant control. In fiscal year 23, we did like 1,800 acres of control of just woody species. So it's become our number one practice as far as number of instances in a contract. So I thought the group might be interested to hear about that. The other thing from the CISMA is they also talked about local working groups. So that's another method of getting funding to local levels. Is there's a local group organized by the conservation districts, and usually at the NRCS in district offices, they'll have meetings with local interested parties, agency staff, nonprofits, private landowners, producers, forest landowners that can set priorities for their local funding pools where they can outline what they want to address. And, there's at least 3 out there around Vermont now that are focused on, at least in part, some invasive plant control, habitat work. So that's another option for folks at the local level to get involved and target some of that funding from NRCS.
That's
Toby,
great.
who would they reach out to? Like you to find out where those local areas are, or is it
Yeah,
listed somewhere?
as a first stop, I could direct them. It's you could go through the district conservationist or the district staff. But if anybody wants to reach out through me, that's fine too. I can point you in the right direction.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
Katie, how are you doing?
I'm okay, except for this cold that won't go away. From Fish and Wildlife Service, I don't think any major updates. The only thing I'll share is that we're working on developing a position that would be a 4-year duration that would help to support a lot of our restoration and stewardship work on private lands across the states, some of which would include invasive plant control. So we're not sure when that's going to come out, but yeah, big thumbs up, Toby. We are hoping to cast a really wide net in terms of getting people to apply for that. So I'll share it around when it comes out.
Anne?
Not much to share, just eager to get back outside in gardens and farms.
Yep. And Bonnie?
Hello. I do have some updates. I feel like my participation in this committee and some of your questions have really started some good conversations at VTrans among particularly in the design and construction side. So we are trying to figure out a training. We're planning to have someone come and train us this summer on invasive plant ID, ones that are on the list for, some of us know some of them, but I don't think any of us know all of them collectively. So that is exciting. After lots of back and forth, we have a plan note now that's going to go into each, maybe I wouldn't call it a plan note, but a note to contractors in construction plans to remind them that we have best management practices and those need to be followed if invasive species are found, which is definitely progress. And I guess that's what I have for now, but it's really, thank you for your questions and for, your partnership on this. It's been helpful in starting, I think, good things.
Well, that's really exciting. Congratulations on getting that stuff off the ground. That's great. So what is the approach of hiring somebody to come teach you about the invasives? Have you mapped out what that's going to look like and who you're going to use?
We have contracts that are existing. I think that we can kind of pull from, like some general environmental contracts that we can ask for someone to give us training for a few days in the summer. So I think we do have a funding mechanism, so that will be good. I just have to, it's on me right now to pull it together, and I need to do that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Any questions for any of the people who gave updates?
So I'd like to hear more about Japanese lilac. I never knew that was bad.
Yeah, Syringia reticulata. So, and it's interesting because we've had an established population at St. Gaudens for quite some time, right? This was planted, I want to say in like the 1930s. I'd have to double check on that. And there's an alley that's there still. It's historic, and we're talking about getting it removed, right? So they've been present on the land for a very long time. And then only in riparian areas, riparian and wetland areas have we noticed they've really established. The worst outbreak was down. So this LA is maybe, 50, 60 yards from a really steep embankment that goes down to Below Me down Brook. And that empties out into, or Below Me up Brook, that empties out into Below Me down Brook, that empties out into the Connecticut. And underneath, there's this area that forms like a sycamore floodplain, right? Where it's, a lot of alluvial soils, it's interspersed with, different wetlands. And so this Japanese tree lilac established underneath these sycamores in these soils and really started to outcompete everything that was there, right? And it coexisted in that site with, honeysuckle to a lesser extent, oriental bittersweet in the understory. And the trees got to be, I think the largest trees were about 25 feet tall and about maybe 5 inches in diameter, right? So large trees. So we noticed that they formed, kind of a mid canopy layer underneath those sycamores in this riparian area, right? And then also existed downstream in the scrub shrub wetland down there, right? And so it was just kind of odd, right? Like they've been there for quite a long time. And we took that infestation out when we were in there doing invasive plant management for honeysuckle and for oriental bittersweet, right? But upstream, right, like right next to the existing infestation, underneath a power line in kind of a wettish area, not a wetland or riparian area, there's still a good population there. And they are reproducing, and a lot of them are young, right? So there's a couple of larger trees in that area adjacent to the planting, right, that are large. They're 25 feet, and again, probably 4 to 5 inches in diameter. And now we've noticed a lot of young seedlings, right? So these are head height, not huge. So it's interesting because in looking at it, it was like, okay, wait a minute, what is this? First of all, like a couple of years ago when we were first grappling with it, we had one of our consulting foresters walk and say, "This is really taking over," right? And what are other? Is this on anyone else's radar, right? So two states have done PRAs essentially for Japanese tree lilac. Both concluded that more data is needed, right? There is a SISMA in New York State that I think is administered by TNC, where they're like the primary contact for it, that states, yes, this is capable of taking over, don't spread this, right? But it seems to be one of those situations where it's almost situational. It has the potential to invade some environments, but it's not like a honeysuckle. So that's, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think I came here just wanting to be like, hey, is this a thing anywhere else? It is one of those things where, I don't know if it's because they've just been present in the environment for longer at St. Gaudens. They were part of the kind of historic plantings there. Or if St. Gaudens is just a one-off, or if this is something that's coming down the pike in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
What I gather with sport in the Green Mountain National Forest, spending through lots, I think it might be problematic. I was just looking at all the iNaturalist records. There are a lot on, but it only showed up in Vermont in 1971. It's maybe one of those things that just takes off all of a sudden.
Yeah,
by surprise.
it seems like there needs to be a good amount of pressure. So in looking at particularly this one across the way, like you get a mature one that's maybe like 15 years old. It's on And then you'll start to see smaller ones that are here, right? So I don't, you know, if I had to guess, right, and I think more research is definitely needed, you know, I bet there's a pretty long period for the seed to really become super viable. Right? It's not like honeysuckle, like some of these other ones where, you know, you just get that. It seems like a slow burning, like, station, because even the ones, even that thicket that's been there for a very long time, there was no escapes in the actual forest. Right, so they only existed in this floodplain. And there wasn't a single seedling that I've come across, and I've looked quite extensively, and we have silviculture forest health data plots. Not on any of those, in any of those plots, right? So it is confined to a certain area, but in that one setting, it seems to be able to take over pretty extensive.
Is that something that we should add to the watch list, even though we don't have a formal watch list?
I would certainly say so. I mean, we noticed that it did environmental damage to warrant being managed at St. Gaudens, and it's already on the watch list, I think.
Oh, is it?
I don't know if it's on the watch list or if they concluded after this PRA.
Which watch list?
The,
Ours.
not ours, the ones in New York and Minnesota. which
Ah,
they do
gotcha.
have
Yeah.
Potential, or New York has a whole list of all these assessments they've done for quite a number of species that have the potential to be. So they kind of do a PRA when it goes on to their list.
That could be helpful,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, it's on the EDS maps. Did you look at the other states and how they listed? So just those two states listed?
Just those two states, but
Okay.
I only looked for, I mean, I've looked in the past, the most extensive kind of like, yes, this is an invasive answer actually came from this New York citizen.
Hmm.
And then New York State did that assessment, which I think just called for more data.
Hmm.
And so did the state of Minnesota, and I think the Minnesota one was 2021. So it seems like it's kind of like, I bet there's a number of sites that are like St. Gaudens where it's been there for long enough and it has those suitable habitats. That, you know, there's instances where people that, obviously it's on people's radar, right? And the fact that, you know, the New York State list that I reviewed maybe has 200 species on it. The fact that out of all the naturalized or introduced species, this would be on there, I think speaks for itself in some way.
Mhm.
Nursery industry, I'm just wondering, VNLA, they couldn't make it today, but from your understanding, is there a lot of it sold in the trade? I think it's just something that we need to address and talk about, and just, you know, it might be an interesting conversation to have their perspective too on that.
I think it's fast becoming a favorite, you know.
Okay.
It's a beautiful tree. I mean, it really is, you know.
I was just wondering whether or not the state has any like urban community forest, like they put out publications, whether or not it's a recommended species of tree to plant in various, you know, like,
I don't know what they're
I don't know.
recommending these days.
I don't either.
think it's on their list.
It's not on their list. Okay.
Their list
Okay.
recently.
Nice.
Sure.
Okay, all right.
I think it's common lilac, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
It's hardly ever seen.
And it is Serenga.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reticulata.
Reticulata. Is this a surprise to everybody? Is this the first time everybody's hearing about this one? Just curious. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd heard
And is that
about it.
like? I'm sorry, Bonnie, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have a landscape inspector who's amazing, who helps us on construction projects. And he was telling me that he thinks we should plant less of them, and that he's seen that they like to spread. So this is very helpful. And yeah. So sort of, but this is, I didn't realize in riparian areas, that's very interesting.
Okay, so anecdotally, it's definitely, people are seeing a theme, it sounds like. Okay, well, there'll be plenty of conversations, hopefully when the rule goes through. Do we have any other conversations around any of the other updates or questions for anybody before we move on to the Agency of Ag's update?
I also forgot to mention that we're working with Mississippi State through the Army Corps of Engineers and the UVM Spatial Analysis Lab to develop GIS data and layers for 8 invasive species for the next 5 years. So we're developing the I'm not a GIS person, so that we're developing the software so you could spatially analyze these plants easily. So we're building the capacity for these 8 species: Eurasian water milfoil, Phragmites, the invasive one, water chestnut, Japanese knotweed, European prophet, flowering rush, yellow floating heart, curly-leaf pondweed, and variable leaf. And this is a huge undertaking. So we're looking for sites that are 100% cover of these particular species. So we're also working with New York DEC to identify species. So I didn't really know, especially with knotweed and Phragmites, if anybody has like one location where it's just 100% Phragmites and or knotweed, more than 1 acre.
You want us to send you shape files if you have it?
Yeah, or lat longs and maybe just screenshots at this time. So we're just trying to gather all that information. They're going to be coming next month to do some field visits, understanding that some of these species are not going to be up, but we're just going to go visit sites and see how dense they are.
I mean, Waterbury Reservoir on the eastern side, access to state lands off of
Moscow
Road, thank you. It's pretty thick. Did you want different?
Oh, with knotweed.
Yeah, all along the
Yeah.
bank. I mean, that's a big area.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Yeah, so anything like that, if you want to just send me, if you think of any places.
So knotweed and Phragmites.
Knotweed and Phragmites, and I should know the aquatic species, but if you happen to be like, oh yeah, there's tons of this, that look like curly leaf pondweed is not normally 100% infestation. But if anything anecdotally comes up, and oh, I know this place that's got 100% this an acre, let me know. So they're going to be flying like 5 times throughout the growing season for the next few years to get images as the plants are developing. Yeah, so it was initially identified through our work with water chestnut on Lake Champlain, and trying to map out all of the water chestnut in Lake Champlain. And we realized that since we're harvesting the plant, they can't really get good images. So we are looking for non-managed locations so we can get the spatial imagery that would be more meaningful and use in search engines. Exciting project.
That is.
Great, anything else? Okay. Quick update from Ag. So we actually reached out and we said, it's okay if you don't want to do the pedicides PRA, because we realized there's a little bit of a backlog right now with, we're trying to push the noxious weed rule through, and we will talk about it, not in VIEPAC. But because of that, we realized we would rather just have it settled and then figure out how we're going to be adding the plants that we select as a group after that's all settled. So just in terms of transparency, we didn't do our Ficaria one. We do have the other ones that we voted on in the slot that we will push forward when we can. But in the meantime, what we did do collectively with DEC and Fish and Wildlife and DEC and FPR was select 8 plant species that we agreed are the biggest ones of concern for us. And those included stilt grass, kudzu, mileminute, porcelain berry, wineberry, water soldier, water wheel, and water hyacinth. And so everybody worked a little bit on their own respective mini PRAs, and we submitted it through our agency and hopefully have them declared as plant pests. That has not gone through completely yet. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the timeline is, but I think all signs indicate that this, you know, we should find out at some point, hopefully before the season. But yeah, I think A&R and Ag are talking and hopefully figure it out. So that's just a quick explanation about what we're doing in the meantime. That will, if that happens, allow us to go out and create outreach material and refer people and just try to increase the outreach around those particular pests or plants. So
You said you're also changing the noxious weed rule, so are you going to be asking for other sister agencies input before it goes out to the public?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yep, we definitely will.
What's the timeline on that?
Well,
Ideally, the height of the field season.
yeah. Did you say
Ideally.
height at the season?
Ideally.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what the timeline is.
We
Stephanie?
haven't filed any paperwork.
Oh, okay.
So the timeline isn't established
Okay.
relative to the APA process. But I believe that we're gonna be talking, or we have actually shared it with FDR at many.
Yep.
Maybe even in this room.
Maybe in this room, yep. But yeah, so we'll talk about it, not as VIEPAC, but you know, as our respective agencies, and that'll be a super interesting conversation.
Is FPR couldn't make it today?
They are not. Yep, but Kathy did send some reviews and her comments that go through. But we'll leave that for the next meeting. And Judy and Ben, do you have anything else as related to invasive plants? I mean, I think a lot of us are going to be a wait and see mode. We do have a working MOU with FPR now, which is fantastic. And we had the mile a minute situation and pale swallowwort trial last summer. Hopefully we won't get more, but we probably will. And we'll see what happens. So with that, Bethany is with the Agency of Ag. She deals with everything around testing and pesticides and things like that. So Bethany, all yours.
Hello, everyone. Some of you may have seen me at the agency before. I've worked as a field staff for over 20 years. And then last year, I took over for pesticide certification and training after Ann McMillan retired. So Emily has asked me to come and speak to y'all because the biggest question I think everyone has is about category 14, our new category, which is the terrestrial invasive plants. So first of all, we are actively working on writing a manual. There is no manual that I could find that any other state has for this particular category, which means we are starting from scratch, having to write our own manual. We are close to having what I think is a good first draft of that manual. Once I'm able to edit it down a little bit, we will then open that manual up to a wider audience to help us review. So if any of you have any great ideas about some folks who would be great to help review this manual, I am all ears because I would love to have more eyes checking it out. So that being said, my hope is that later this year that I will have, because once I have the manual, I can write the exam. And that's my hope, is that later this year that I can have that category ready for people to take the exam in. So the big question I know as everyone is, do I need to get this in addition to what I already have? Because currently, if you're doing nothing but invasive plant control, we have folks get category 2, which is forestry. It fits in a lot of situations, but there's a lot of situations that does not fit in, which is part of the reason we created this category, because category 14 will allow you to do invasive plant control, terrestrial invasive plant control across a wide variety of sites. So what I would say is if you have category 2 and all of your work is just in the forests, stick with your category 2. That will allow you to do any type of pesticides in a forest setting. If you're doing exclusively invasive plant control across a wide variety of landscapes, and I would recommend you get category 14. Of course, you can keep both to give yourself a little more flexibility, but category 14 will be just for invasive plant control. Another question people ask, because I know there are volunteers who will volunteer to spray or treat terrestrial invasive plants. So our definition of a commercial applicator is one who uses pesticides on the land or homes of others for remuneration or gratis. So even though it's gratis for free, they are still a commercial applicator and must meet all the commercial applicator requirements, even though they aren't getting paid. The permit there, we have a terrestrial invasive permit now. So that permit is only for people who do not have control over the land. So right now, think of it more as a right-of-way, because right now we have a right-of-way permit, and those who are doing right-of-way work get category 6, which is right-of-way. That right-of-way permit does not allow for invasive plant control at all. The only time that it can is if that invasive plant is causing a safety hazard to the right-of-way, whether it's something covering guardrails or something like a multi-floor rose underneath a utility line, which they consider that a hazard for the workers who could be working in the right-of-way. So under that, they can't treat normally invasives. So if you had a town or another municipality that wanted to do invasive plant control along the right-of-way, of course, they have a right to maintain that right-of-way, but they don't control the rights to that land. So that is when the permit would be in place. Let's see, I think Emily had given me some things to consider, and I think I've covered that. Can't think of anything else. Is there any questions anyone has for me?
I'm sure there will be plenty.
Yes, I see Toby's.
Yeah, how about Kim and then Toby?
Hi, Bethany. Oh, I'm off.
You do.
Kim with the Aquatic Nuisance Control Program for DEC. So we've had a lot of questions recently about pesticide use in aquatic nuisance control. So I see the order, the Cat 5 manual on your website. And is that something that's going to be revised or?
The category 5 manual?
Category 5, yes.
There are no plans at this time. Most of the manuals we use are Cornell's manuals. And if they update their manuals, then we would need to update our exams as well. But currently, that is what I continue to move forward with for category 5, which is aquatic.
Okay, so if you're not going to update it, that's good. Is there any way to look at that manual without having to like buy it or just have that available?
We have a copy at our office. But that's our office copy that I wouldn't want to leave in the office. I mean, you're welcome to come by and look at it.
Yeah. some of the questions that we've had recently, and this may come back to you, I have talked to other Agency of Agriculture people about the use of Procelicor and it being PFAS ingredients. I don't know, I don't think I talked to you about that, but we've gotten many emails and correspondence from the public about PFAS and Procelicor and other pesticides that are being used too. So I don't know if this is the opportunity to, discuss that or just put it on your radar. That is a question.
I'm not the one that would be best to speak about that. Stephanie might be able to direct better than I can. I know that there is a bill in the legislature that was addressing PFAS, and there's a portion about it for pesticides. I don't know where that has landed right now, what the update is on that. But that's the extent of my knowledge on that. I specifically more about pesticide licensing, certifications, trainings.
Thank you.
Okay, Toby.
Oh, okay, thanks. Bethany, just curious about the terrestrial, you said terrestrial invasives. So how much into wetlands? I mean, does that cover these plants into wetlands and the interface of uplands? And I guess I'm just wondering where the line is between aquatic and terrestrial.
Well, I would say for the rule, what I would follow is if there's water present, get the aquatic. If you're doing, again, invasive plant control across a variety of landscapes, then I would get both. I know some wetlands I've seen because I've observed the application. They're actually dry when they're doing invasive plant control. If it's going to be at a time when there's going to be water present, then I would say get the aquatic as well.
So standing water is our trigger.
I would have to think about that one.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear for when I get the questions too, because we work from forest, old fields, riparian areas into wetlands, and, depending on the season and the weather these days, there's oftentimes standing water here and there that we're working around or.
So what I'm seeing for category 5, our category 5 does state that is for someone who uses pesticides applied to adjacent to standing or running waters. So I guess, yes, that would include standing waters.
So
Okay.
the CEC provides the aquatic nuisance control permits for pesticides that are utilized in standing or running water. We always attempt to tell contractors not to apply in standing water or running waters, so you don't have to get an aquatic nuisance control permit. Because it just puts another layer of administrative burden on the contractor. And also the aquatic nuisance control permits, they're difficult and challenging to get. So, we really strive to have applicators not apply pesticides in any source of water. Because that would also, trigger a wetland permit. And then, it's just, we don't want to administratively burden contractors.
So my question was actually exactly Toby's, right? Because I'm licensed in New Hampshire and I work in their system more closely. We contract our invasive plant management, right? For the most part, anything that has to do with herbicide. And so in the state of New Hampshire, there's a setback, right? It's like 25 feet from a public water, right? Or it can be up to, I think, 200 feet or 150 feet from like a national shoreline protection area. But there is this kind of line. So you're in talking about the different categories. I'm licensed in aquatic. aquatic and in forest, right? Would this invasive plant certification allow you to cross that line, right? So like, there are times when you're not in a forest and you're in a wetland and there's no standing water, or at least no standing water that you can see with your naked eye because the vegetation is so thick or whatever. Would you be able to get this license? Because in the state of New Hampshire, you need, if you have a permit, you need to be licensed in that category. There's no cruise, there's no line of sight or anything. Right. So with this new license, you would be able to cross that line into the riparian areas.
Again, if you thought there would be any standing water, I would get both. This is an unusual category in that it's about what you're treating and not where, which is most of the other categories that we have. Most of the other categories we have are a specific location. Like whether it's agricultural plant or forests, or landscapes. This one though is going with the pest, which is again a little unusual. So it's a bit of uncharted territory in a way, especially since no other state has this category. But if there's crossover, I would definitely say get both. Now, how would you get the certification? If you already are certified in Vermont, you can add the category. This manual will be a PDF. We don't plan to charge anything for it. We'll put it on our webpage so that it'll be there for people to study and take the exam, which I know we're a little more straightforward than other states. Some other states require multi-levels for certification. I know New Hampshire is one of them. They need a supervisory license, some for, I think, each business, which has quite a few layers. You have to apply an application. You have to submit an application before you can take the exam, or else you just sign up to take it when you're ready.
But just to clarify, this is for identified terrestrial invasives that are outlined in our noxious weed quarantine. So it's focused on the terrestrial invasive plants and treatment of those in, here I'm reading it, forest nurseries, sensitive ecosystems, residential, non-agricultural cropland, and other areas for the specific control of terrestrial invasive plants.
I just think it's great. I mean,
That's the category, so
it does make it really imperative to get the species list up to date. If it's tied to that.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yes, I like that, actually. It's positive pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if it's terrestrial, then we're assuming that it's not aquatic.
Well, I mean, knotweed is a perfect example of like one of those, like, yeah, it's terrestrial.
Right.
But, and then, like it sets up a weird precedent because you need the aquatic license to treat there, but you don't need an aquatic permit. Right.
Technically, if you're applying it to water, then you do need an aquatic nuisance control permit.
So I guess the question is then why would you need an aquatic license if you don't need an aquatic?
And that's why we always try to say that please don't apply it to water, so you don't have to take that next step.
No, but it's confusing because I've had so many conversations with people at the state of New Hampshire, because for us, it triggers like Clean Water Act permitting from the EPA. And so I'm like, okay, I've got this station, it's in a wetland, right? Like, and their response to me was, oh, well, it's a terrestrial species, right? So like, technically, as long as you avoid water, the same answer that you guys are giving.
Yeah.
You don't need an aquatic permit, and it doesn't trigger the Clean Water Act. But it is confusing for applicators who are going out and trying to, because in some documentation, wetlands are clearly part of the aquatic realm.
Right.
And in others, it's, and I don't think it needs to trigger a huge, we don't want to stop people from treating in some of the most sensitive areas, right?
Right, but I
prevent
think,
environmental damage, but if you're a licensed applicator, you should be able to understand this right.
or running water
Yeah.
or surface water. So I think that's where the line is, if it's surface water or any water. The way that DEC looks at it is those pesticides you're using might because of concern for other species and non-target species. So that's why we would have a closer lens and require that additional aquatic nuisance control permit and potentially a wetland permit too. And if it's gonna be a wetland permit, you might likely won't get the permit because the wetland program does not really approve of any pesticide use in wetlands.
Wow, that's really.
So they don't, yeah, they
Well,
don't, the invasives are okay, I guess. Or is it just mechanical, it's just not chemical?
It's just, yeah, mechanical or hand pulling. And so there's very few, I'm told he's gonna say something otherwise. But that's why we just try to say, if you're applying for a knotweed or Phragmites, make sure there's no standing water, period. So we don't have to get involved. Toby, you're gonna say something otherwise, right?
Not well. We have a standing kind of sort of like a programmatic agreement plan with DEC wetlands, where we have like all these preconditions of how we would work in a wetland to control invasive plants. And, one of our conditions is aquatic safe herbicide. So we do treatment in wetlands. I guess this is making me a little bit uncomfortable about the aquatic. If you're near, you're saying if you're adjacent to water, then you need the aquatic. And that's on the chance that you may get pesticide into that water. Is that the idea? But anyway, I think just for getting ahead of this, I think you're going to get a lot of questions around this. So it'd be good to be thinking about this and how best to talk about it and define it with people, because you're talking about common reed, Phragmites and flowering rush and yellow iris, all these things that they're standing water some of the time for sure. So it's just a matter of waiting until the water goes down, hopefully.
Right, and perhaps, we DEC should look at that a little closer especially if you're updating the manual, and we could provide some guidance, because it is confusing.
Okay, so just to be clear though, I want to make sure everybody understands that if you need an aquatic nuisance permit to control an invasive in an aquatic environment, which I hear is standing or running water, wetlands, you're talking to Kim Jensen at DEC. If you're interested in getting the category 14 for terrestrial invasive plant control in a variety of environments outside of a forest, you want to talk to Bethany. I don't want to cross signals here about because we're talking about a lot of things right now.
Right.
Those were the two clarifying points that I wanted to make about who to talk to. And certainly Kim Jensen, Stephanie Smith, Emily, the Agency of Agriculture and DEC will be in communications with each other if we need to move people's questions across agencies. That's not a problem. But then I also heard if we were going to update the Category 5 manual, currently not a plan to do so, that we will work with DEC.
Yeah.
The Agency of Agriculture will work with DEC.
Yeah.
Kim Jensen. All right. Okay, cool. All right.
Good.
I wanted to just make sure. And if I missed anything there, Bethany, you were listening as well. Let me certainly speak up.
No, I don't think so. 'Cause it's giving me something to think about, and I think we're gonna need to have an internal conversation to figure out what our policy will be regarding some of these invasives. What are we going to determine? When is it terrestrial and when is it not? Because as you've said, there are ones that do overlap, and that's something. It's It's a really good point. Now it's making me think. So we're gonna have to, that is definitely something now I'm going to add to this because to figure out how we want to handle and what we're going to do.
Great.
And the manual's still in, like, we're still drafting it, so if
Yeah.
folks have, yeah, if they have comments that they want to share about this conversation, please send to Beth Creaser or Stephanie Smith. I don't know which one's easier to spell, they're both fairly easy. Just let us know, because then we can add that in, that terrestrial invasive, that crossover species, or whatever it is that we need. And potentially cross-reference regulatory programs where you might need to, to inform the applicator, like, hey, we're not a standalone agency. There are others that need to consult with. Right. So we're happy to get that information too.
I think the other thing that I think too is like, what's the greatest risk? Like, is it more likely that a major environmental issue happened because of a spill during an application for invasive species that's being conducted by a licensed person? Or is it more likely that the compliance becomes such an obstacle that the habitat degrades because people can't access, they can't get through to what they need to do the management, right? Because I know the National Park Service, we have so many layers of regulation, and it is almost like 60% of my job is compliance, and then 40% is the action.
Yeah, I think, Grace, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Bethany had mentioned the right of way rule. Just to clarify, does this new category affect the application of herbicide and right of ways? And I'm not familiar with the permit that applicants can get to treat in the right of way, but is there, I guess my question is, if a terrestrial invasive species is not a health hazard, is there any way to treat it in the right of way, or is that still not an option?
It now with our invasive plant permit, they can treat within the right of way. Yeah, but that's the part of, because in our rule, it specifically says like the right of way permit it cannot be used solely to control invasive plants. So now we have the invasive plant permit, which will cover those instances for towns, municipalities that want to do invasive plant control within their right of way, or on land that they don't own or have control over. Like I live in yes.
Does it have to be specifically for safety? Is there an exemption process
right-of-way?
where for the
No,
right of way, or it can
the
be for
whole
any
point-
reason?
The whole point of a right of way is to maintain the right of way for safety again, it's a safety hazard when guardrails are covered. So it's to keep the plants away from the guardrails, and likewise, there's safety hazards for the people working within the right of ways. So if there's any plants that would be of a danger to the people working there. So if there's a bunch of knotweed growing all around the guardrails, then yes, they can spray it in that instance. But of course,
What if knotweed is growing and it's impacting the habitat of a species of plant, and there's not an overt danger caused by, or a human safety issue, but it is causing habitat degradation in the right of way? Is there a way to get an exemption to allow for treatment of that?
not for the right of way permit, but that's where the invasive permit would come in.
But it would have to be an invasive plant on our list.
Correct. Is that a new permit?
It's relatively new, and I'm gonna send you the page, all of our permits that includes this particular.
Okay.
And I'm gonna copy Emily. And it outlines, like it says, like right of way permit for safety considerations. And it says, the other one is, it's called like terrestrial invasive plant control permits. These permits are issued for a person intending to control a terrestrial invasive plant on property that the person does not have a legal right to control, The difference between this permit and the traditional right-of-way permit is that this permit allows the permit agent to control terrestrial invasive plant species for purposes other than clearing or maintaining. So that's the difference.
And that would be not just road rights of ways, but it could be like a utility corridor.
It could be a utility corridor, it could
Gas
be
line.
a gas line, it could be like an easement or access in like a land trust kind of situation potentially, where you're crossing multiple property boundaries, and it's not the safety of crossing.
And does the applicant need to be a town or a municipality?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, New Hampshire just puts those two into one. They just do the right of way permit and then you can do invasive species. And then you just don't have to give public notice for invasives. So like if you have a right of way permit and you're treating another species, it's not an invasive, you need to do public notice for a certain amount of time. And with, with invasives, you don't need to do that public notice, but you need to let the state know. So I have to fill out like a pesticide application, like a notice to give it to the state, and then they have the ability to come.
Hey,
Yeah,
Toby.
I'm not sure
sorry.
how the, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how the terrestrial invasive plant control permit is going to function. I mean, I'm very familiar with the right-of-way permits. I looked at them quite a bit when I was field staff. I would have to do the inspections for that. Which that does include a component of public notification. Looking at our rule, I don't know if that, when the permit is written, if it's going to be put into the permit that you're going to need to do some kind of public notification, and by public notification, it would mean you would have to do like a radio ad or a newspaper ad. But I'm not seeing it listed. So I don't know if that will be a component of the permit or not. I don't even know if we've issued any invasive plant permits yet. We have. Okay.
The deadline is April 1st to submit the application, and then we actually have on our homepage of the agency's website is a public comment box in the top right-hand side. And if you click in there, you'll see like any kind of public comment within the agency. So it's pretty broad what it's covering, but like if you look down, you'll see there are two that are under consideration. So three actually, two for Hyde Park, one for another community, and you can see the application.
And I think we talked about this, had just getting Dave here at some point to specifically talk about permits. So if the committee wants, we can get Dave Huber, who's in charge of the permits, in at the next meeting. So I have 3 months to think about all the hardest questions you can.
I've got a hard question.
Wait a second, Toby's had his hand up for a sec.
I was just gonna say, I just want to thank Bethany for coming on and talking about that. I wasn't trying to poke at it or anything. I think it's just maybe highlighting maybe an incomplete understanding of the aquatic side for me a little bit. And I think it's just gonna be something we need to figure out, make sure we're clear where all these lines are between the different categories for the future. So thanks.
Well, I just have a quick one, which is, so that permit, you're only able to apply for it till April 1st.
There's a deadline for the season, yeah.
That doesn't give people a lot of flexibility.
That's, I think, what it says. It must say to have that deadline outlined somewhere, either in the rule.
The deadline is listed in the rule. Last year, when the rule got approved, I don't know if this is still what we're going to do, but I seem to recall saying that April 1st deadline, I think, might be very flexible, because this is one type of permit that can't necessarily plan that far ahead at times. And I'm not sure why that was put in there. So Dave though would be the one to be able to answer if he would accept permit applications after April 1st.
I'm assuming the 802-345 is Mike and not Dave. Is that Mike? Dave said he might pop in an hour, like around an hour, but I think he would have chimed in by then. I just want to make sure to recognize whoever the number is. Okay.
Why don't we ask them to?
Can whoever the number is say your name?
Who is the number?
Hello, you're on mute if you're saying something. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on.
Can I just ask
Yeah,
one
yeah,
more
yeah.
quick clarifying question? Bethany, you said that people.
You scared them?
I totally scared him.
It's a weed calling it.
Yeah. You said that people who treat invasives outside of forested systems should get the category 14.
It's
Is that
all
gonna
gonna,
be
de-
required?
no, it's all gonna depend on what type of work you do and where. So if you're doing, but I'm telling it, if you're doing nothing but invasive plant control, then I would say get category 14. Because there's some people that is all they do. They're not going to do anything else. If you are someone that has category 3A and you predominantly do work in landscapes and you have someone who says, hey, could you control this knotweed in my yard? You're not going to need to get a category 14 in that instance, because the category 3A covers that location. So again, it's a little weird in that this one is the pest and not the location.
But
It's one of the, yeah.
If this really would be the most appropriate category for us, are we going to be required? Is there any oversight? Because we're already certified, is what I'm asking.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Do I
Yeah,
have to take a test?
I think
Yeah.
we would say if you're doing invasive plant work and that's it, switch over to category 14 and drop your category 2. Yeah. I know it means taking another test. I mean, we could have a conversation in amongst like in-house to decide if those with category 2 who are doing invasive work, if we would grandfather you all in and switch you. Haven't gotten that far yet. But yeah, I know no one wants to take another test.
I guess the one thing I wanted to say is, oh, go, sorry.
No, you go.
Okay. Just quickly, I think the only thing I would think about is, there are going to be those towns who might say, okay, we know we need to control vegetation right away. Why don't we also do the right thing and control the invasives? They would then have to get 2 separate permits.
If they are doing double duty, then yes. If they're just doing invasive plant control, then it would be the invasive plant permit. But if they're wanting to say, oh, well, we're out taking care of a right of way for safety and we want to be able to treat the invasives, then they would, need to get the 2 permits. I think there might be a lot of overlap in those 2 permits though.
Yeah, I guess the question is more that, the consideration is like encouraging people to do the invasive plant management. It's another layer of permitting that they have to apply to. And I also want to echo what, Toby said, that, this isn't unique to Vermont, and other states have these same questions of their, and it's the same confusion. And so there's nothing like new here. It's not anything you guys are doing. But I'm always thinking from that lens of like, how do we make it easier to do the management?
Yeah, it's because I have to say, in all the years I've been doing this, I know like treating some areas like the wetlands or natural areas, they don't fit any category that we have. It just doesn't, as I say, and we choose category 2 because it's the closest one, and we're kind of taking, as I say, a square peg into a round hole. And there are some other gray areas when it comes to pesticide categories, because you do have some unique situations that don't quite fit. So we find the best fit. I know that because like I've reached out to other states. They do have some states specifically have right of way for they do right of way for invasive plants. I've seen that. Oregon, I had gotten some information from Oregon. They use what they call a regulatory category, which we do have, which is category 9. That is only for government or employees to do regulatory pest control, which would include more than just plants. But they were saying that right now that is what they have, and it sounds like they're finding the same thing. We're trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole. And the message I got from Oregon was they said, they go, we are actually thinking of broadening the scope of that category because right now it's just for government employees. So yeah, it's an issue everywhere. I think it's going to be a matter of how each state tackles it. So far as I think the approach we're taking is a bit different than some of the other states. I haven't heard from all of the other states. I don't know if their lack of response to, because we have a listserv, is because they don't have it, or they just didn't reply.
This is Mike. Emily, can I chime in?
Hi, Mike. Yes, it's you.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, I'll echo what Toby said. Thanks, Bethany. Great summary here of what's ahead. And I apologize that sometimes when I get muted, the phone, I have to call back in. So apologies for that. So I did that. My point or my question kind of echoes what's already been said. The lines are incredibly hard to trace on landscapes that have been manipulated, managed, degraded, compacted, and especially when you have years of drought in a row, year after year after year, it can be pretty difficult for people to basically read the land and figure out what needs to be done. So I guess I would ask if you could, in the development moving forward, if you could walk through some case studies to actually show people like this is what you would have to do to manage the Burlington bike path or the right of way that runs through a conservation area in Red Rocks Park in South Burlington. And then the reason I suggest the case studies is because giving public notice is important to the people that are walking their dogs when the trail, the walking trail and the right of way and the public conserved space all coincide, or they all or like a railroad crossing. So you get these places where it's complex because there's like a combination of 4 things coming together. And if somebody's walking their dog or is chemically sensitive, I think we would want to address that. I'll just close by saying, please include like poison ivy as is that considered a hazard to people working the site? And when you talk about safety.
Yeah, poison ivy, if it's in a right of way, they can treat poison ivy as part of their right of way permit. And it has been done, but it has to be within the right of way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just would love to see just good detail on what constitutes a safety issue or hazard, because a lot of times it's line of sight. If a right-of-way approaches a railroad crossing and there's bicyclists involved and you have Japanese knotweed, what do you do there? So case studies is kind of my point. Thanks again for speaking today.
Thanks, Mike.
I was just gonna say, because I lost my train of thought, but it's okay, that the category 14 manual will have an ID section for our terrestrial invasives. And so that's one of the positives that's coming out of the manual in the new category is that you will have an opportunity to study, to understand what you're identifying.
Any other questions for Bethany while she's here?
Does it list the pesticides?
No.
Approved Pesticides?
Yeah.
Oh,
You can always get any of the Vermont approved pesticides on the agency website. We have lists categorized by restricted or class A, restricted sales, class B, and then class pesticide. They're all listed on our website.
Are those specific for riparian areas?
And these are just the pesticides registered in Vermont, not specific to any site of treatment. And then always follow the label. I'll just say that. Label is followed.
And Bethany, when the time comes, if you're looking for outside folks to review the manual for that category, I'd be happy to.
Oh, that'd be great.
This is Lynn at the Nature Conservancy. Just since like that category is pretty much all we do for
Okay.
using pesticides.
That I really appreciate that. I know, like I'm so grateful to like Ben, Judy, and Em. We've been meeting regularly to go through what we have. We're close to getting it again to a good draft, but you know, once we get that draft, I know that it's going to need a lot more editing after that. And that's, you know, we're the ones that keep looking at it. So some fresh eyes is definitely needed. Okay, good. And
Anything else? Thank you, Bethany. You survived. Good, great job. Thank you. So I gather that having Dave here next time is something that would interest committee members. Okay, great. We will try to organize that. All right, thanks, Bethany.
thanks, Bethany.
thanks for having me. If you've got questions, the best way to reach me, and I'll put it in the chat, is the email address. This is also, if you are certified in Vermont, if you get pesticide credits, the quickest way to get them applied is to email copies, scans, photos of those slips to that email address. You can snail mail them in if you wish, just takes a little longer to get them applied.
Great. Thanks, Bethany. Next on the agenda is the public comment opportunity. Is there anybody? Okay. Let us figure out our next time and place.
Hey, Emily,
3
this
months
is
out.
Mike.
Yep. Oh, hi, Mike. Yep.
Sorry, I was waiting for other people if there was a comment. I just wanted to ask, maybe in this public comment section, the point was made last year that I just want to get the lines clear. The VIEPAC committee, VIEPAC is really about maintaining the lists and really does not get into management world.
That's my understanding. It is simply recommendations. That was made abundantly clear when we were kind of redesigning it. Yeah.
Right. So today's conversation, of course, necessary and useful and helpful. But moving forward, are we staying true to the mission, or is the mission changing to include management approaches now, or?
Which mission?
The mission of the committee.
VIEPAC mission?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think in terms of the committee, we need to keep our scope narrow and focus on recommendations. But I think do you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, that's the mission or the goal of the committee is, I think the point of having Bethany in and talking is that the group of the recommendations made by this committee inform the category 14 manual. Like that's where the nexus is. So our conversation may have ranged a little bit, but all good information based on who's in the room nonetheless.
Yeah, does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of comprehensive conversations. I think that's necessary. I just want to, in my own head, I got to keep it clear between the committee and then the working group that meets after the committee formally closes.
Yes, we're going to end this meeting and then all the respective agencies will come back together and we have a different meeting scheduled. Yep.
Right. I do need to duck out at this point, but that was informative today, and thanks. And I'll check out the notes, and if I have questions, I'll bounce back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
3 months from now. Looking at.
And I guess I just want to add that conversation we had was because of partners such as TNC in the past of not being able to do those types of management projects. And that's what that
Oh, the
allowed
category
for.
14.
Pardon?
The category 14.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that's appropriate for this
Yeah,
committee, because that's, yeah. Good work.
Usually if a meeting goes off the rails, it's because of me. Always the person that goes.
We have a lot of people.
You can't take all the credit, sorry.
Good.
No, it's not just you.
Oh, good.
Interest group. Okay. What is 3? This is going to be after field season because I know we all have tons of time during summer.
I do have time in August, like early August.
That'd be,
September?
what did we, September? 3 months. All 3. Does September or October work for folks?
October's the treatment
September.
time.
Okay. Any other preferences here?
It depends on if you're scheduling it during my vacation or not.
Okay. You know what? You're here. We can actually work around that. Do you have any preference? No. Okay. All right. How about you, Caitlin, Toby, Bonnie? Do you have preference in terms of month?
Nope, September, October is fine.
No preference, just, yeah, depends on the date.
Yep.
Okay. Let's start throwing them out. How does September, Tuesday, September 10th? That would be a Tuesday.
If it's in the afternoon, that's good.
We can definitely, if that works for folks, the 10th in the afternoon. Does that work for you, Caitlin and Bonnie?
Yeah.
I think so, yes. Yeah, that should work.
Okay.
Did you say September?
Yes. September 10th. We'll do it from like 1 to 4, and we can end early if we need to. And then, yeah. I think that's it. I will send out. Where should we do it? How big is this room? Is a little bit hot too. Apparently it's not my favorite.
Our conference room is probably twice this size.
Do you mind
And
if we
so
crash
it's
your place? Oh, okay.
It's cold. I think it's cold. Bring a sweater.
Sweater, okay.
You can come down to Woodstock. Forest Center.
That's right. It is a really nice center, I have to say. Maybe we will at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, so for this, for September 10th, if it's okay, Lynn, and I'll follow up with you afterwards. We will meet in Montpelier at the TNC office at 1 o'clock, and I will send an invite out with the virtual option as well. Okay. And that's it for this meeting.
Did Forest Parks and Rec have any thing to say?
Updates?
Updates, yeah.
No, nope. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I am stopping the recording now. Yeah, okay. Hey, I think we, okay. Yeah, I think Do you three have the meeting link for the next meeting for the rule conversation?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna be completely signing off from anything related to VIEPAC. And then we're gonna meet up in the next room, okay? And wait,
Sounds
why
good.
don't we take about 10 minutes? Does that work? So we can have a little break? And try to get some air in here? Okay.
Say the next one.
To the next virtual room is what I was talking about. Yeah. Okay, we'll see you three in a little bit, in 10 minutes. Okay.